The mound where his grave is,
Oh, right.
because it was buried in a cemetery. And then,
I'm sure there's people in this building counting on the days. So
Sorry, let me get my thing.
are we live?
We are live. We just went live.
Is the sound live?
Yes. My recording has not started for my other recording.
But we're live.
Yes, we are live. You can say hello.
Okay.
And they'll have to turn the mic.
Are we on everything? All right.
Remember, she had to make a choice. Their chair.
It's 5 o'clock,
What's his name?
and we're gonna, at least because I'm gonna count up the people here. This is a city council special call joint meeting with the Planning and Zoning Commission, and on February 11th, 2026. I can see that we have. Well, if you guys want to make a roll call with that, we can do that with our city council. I think.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, in the past, the council would do a roll call and then the planning and zoning, or whatever board would make it. Yeah, and they do a roll call.
It says here a joint meeting.
Right.
Correct.
So we both have to open a meeting, or I can't just open a meeting and say, here's here and okay, whatever. Let's do a roll call here on city council.
Sheena Martinez, District 1.
Houston Marchman, District 2.
Philip King, District 3.
David Mers Jr. for District 4.
Robert Lee, District 5.
Bruce Alexander, Mayor. Now, let's go ahead and do the planning and zoning, since I don't see your chairman here, who takes the role as your second in command.
Jim is, he won't be here until a little later on because he has another meeting at 10. So if there's anybody willing to step up on our planning and zoning commission to be the chair tonight, I would appreciate it. And you're just going to be,
I need you as the planning and zoning, somebody to take leadership role, to call your meeting to order, do a roll call, and then we can go from there.
yes.
Please.
Call planning and zoning committee meeting in order. We're going to go to roll call.
Marcus Fuentes. Brian Griffin. Troy Griggs.
Valerie Solis.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
And they do have a quorum.
Y'all do have a quorum. Special meetings, we all supposed to have 4 people. Y'all have 4. We have our full council. Okay? That's the quorum requirements for special meetings. Let me go ahead, as we do in all meetings, we open up the floor to citizens' comments. If you want me, I'll read it. City council will hear, I got to do it official. City council will hear comments from any citizen or visitor. Speakers must address their comments to the presiding officer rather than individual council members or staff. Stand at the podium, speak clearly in the microphone, and state your name, residential address before speaking. Speakers will be allowed a maximum of 3 minutes for testimony. In accordance with the State Open Meetings Act, City Council, and I'm going to say the P&Z, is restricted from discussing or taking action on items not listed on the agenda. Action can only be taken in a future meeting. Is there anyone who would like to make citizens' comments? I'll ask it a second time. Anybody want to make citizens' comments? Hearing none, we'll move on. Next item is going to be item 4, discussion and action items, which is discussion and review of development agreement policy. I think Brianna's going to do something, but before we do that, I'm going to make a couple comments. Number one is, I'm not sure what time Mr. Welch may be here, but this meeting's going to end, and I believe by 7. Myself and possibly Jim have previous commitments at 7. So that's the goal here. So we only have one item we're going to talk about, and that's the development agreement. Having said that, before Brianna goes, I'm going to make another comment here is, just like she's going to have in her report, the current city council voted down the UDO last summer. The current council voted down the previous approved development agreement policy, sent it back to P&Z. P&Z made a recommendation. City council, it came to city council, and city council wanted a joint meeting so everybody can talk about it and figure it out. I personally don't feel the need for one. We have ordinances, and I think everybody knows my position. Developers come to town, they should be handed our ordinances and said, that's what your guide is for your subdivision. If you want something different, then you make a recommendation to us, and then we'll negotiate. But we don't negotiate against ourselves, so I don't agree with putting these things down in a written policy. That's my position. Go ahead, Brianna.
Good evening, City Council and Planning and Zoning. As Mayor just stated, this is the Development Agreement Policy Workshop. So tonight is about alignment. So whether that be, y'all agree to adopt the policy or whether agree to not adopt the policy, that's completely up to y'all. But we do want to make sure that we go through all the benefits of having a development agreement policy, and then also have that discussion on maybe why it's not such a good idea, and so we can have that in an open forum. So as Mayor just stated, planning and zoning did go, in the past, few months, they went back and they looked at the old development agreement policy. They provided some direction to staff on what they wanted to see the new development agreement policy to look like. Staff went back to the drawing table, and I think we had a few workshops about that. I know at least one, but I know we've talked about it a lot in open, planning and zoning commission meetings. And, ultimately, planning and zoning decided to go with a value-based development agreement policy. I am gonna lean on y'all, P&Z, y'all were in those meetings and y'all had a lot of input, so please, if y'all feel like I'm stepping out of line or or if I'm misremembering something, please always help me make sure I'm staying on the right track here. Okay, so first, we're here for clarity and direction. This is strictly for staff and for y'all. Y'all should know what y'all want as a city, and it's great that y'all are in this joint workshop to work through some of these things. Just as Mayor stated, the policy evolution, I know we've all heard it, but in August 2024, the initial policy was adopted because we were being inundated by development. June 2025, the policy was rescinded for reconsideration due to the fact that the UDO did not get adopted. And it was felt that there was a lot of UDO requirements in the development agreement policy at the time. The council directed P&Z to review and revise, and then P&Z conducted workshops and developed a values-focused framework for the development agreement policy. In October of 2025, the draft was presented to City Council, and then Council requested a joint workshop to make sure that we're on alignment because they thought it could be maybe drafted differently or they saw a different path forward for this. And so that's why we're here tonight.
Mayor, make a statement.
Sure.
Ms. Soto, after we came to council, okay, I had reviewed it and made a bunch of recommendations, some changes. I was directed by council to send those to P&Z, which I did. Okay, and those were not in the package. I did ask Ms. Howe to send those out. So we did have an input back as directed by council for consideration by P&Z.
Yes, sir, and y'all should have Mr. Lee's comments in front of y'all. So as we go through this, we can always refer back to Mr. Lee, what he suggests for the development agreement policy, or you also have his comments in front of you. Okay, so first we're gonna go through why development agreements matter. So first, they're only using the extraterritorial jurisdiction, ETJ. Development agreements shape the long-term growth. It's commitments to residents. So as the developers are coming to the city, they're making certain commitments to the city, and then also the city back to the developers. It's a contract. They're aligning private development with public priorities. So hopefully going through that process, everything that they do want to do in their development, the city's looking at and seeing how that aligns with what we want for our city. And then protect fiscal sustainability and community character. And this is just another way that we're trying to protect the city, because regardless if these developments come into the city or not, they do impact y'all. It's right there on the edges of your ETJ. Y'all have to see them as y'all driving, y'all have to deal with the traffic, you have to, even though PD is not technically supposed to go out there, I'm sure there's a need for police officers, they will go out there. So there's a lot of interconnectivity, even if you say we don't want development, it's in our ETJ, why do we care about it? Well, I think it does affect y'all in some form or manner, so.
I want to make something very clear. I never have ever said I'm against development. I'm actually in favor of development, but I'm in favor of development in accordance with our established rules and regulations.
Yeah, I don't know if you're gonna get to this because I didn't get a chance to review what you're looking at, but can we get through, do you go through kind of what the state allows us to restrict and what we can't? And why?
Yeah, I put it in there, just what development agreement allows the city to.
There's different rules for in the city limits and in the ETJ. I got that.
Right.
I understand that.
Yeah, so we'll go through that a little bit. I do wanna say that I don't expect this to, but we're gonna come out with the final document in hand. I really wanna get this for alignment and direction. So if we don't need specific numbers, we don't need those, but as we can go through some of these values, just to make sure, like, are these values to you, do we want this in there, and maybe what does that look like? And then I'll come back with language, because I don't expect y'all to draft that language too. So. Okay, and so what a development agreement can regulate that the city cannot? So annexation, so it has to be by consent, but if they're putting it in a development agreement, like I said, that is a contract. So that's something that we can't regulate outside of development agreement. We cannot force annexation. Infrastructure timing, so if we know there's something that needs to come on for even our benefit, we can try and put those regulations or that timing constraint on the developers, so we get that when we need it, and also of course when they need it. That's just part of the negotiations. Developer cost participation. We also want to make sure that they are participating in the financial sustainability for these projects. Enhanced design standards. We can't make developers put in masonry, we can't make them put specific colors, frontages, anything like that. That is something that the Texas has strictly told us we cannot do. So the only way to provide those standards is in a development agreement at this point. Civic land, it is voluntary, but we technically cannot require civic land, especially in commercial properties, where per state law, we cannot make them provide open space for commercial properties. And then incentives tied to benefit. This is just saying that if they do something for us, we can provide the incentives in that development agreement that otherwise wouldn't. Okay, so the planning and zoning perspective, and like I said, planning and zoning, please feel free to chime in and let me know how y'all feel, or let council know how y'all feel. So. From the planning and zoning perspective, like I said, we had a workshop where we went through every aspect of the old development agreement, what was allowed under state law, what we could put in our code, but that we don't have, and then what we already have in our code that was different in the development agreement policy. Everything that was in our code but different in the development agreement policy are things that they have already pulled out, because they said, okay, we already have it in our code, so we don't need to try and make different standards for developers and development agreements. But the things that they did feel strongly about were values first. They felt like it should be a grounded in community values. I think that's something we can all agree on. We want to make sure that it benefits the community, to protect the long-term fiscal sustainability of the city, to protect Castroville's character and identity, to promote high-quality, durable design, to encourage connectivity in complete neighborhoods, to dedicate meaningful civic space, to use incentives strategically but not automatically, and to maintain transparency in the process. So those were 7 things that were needed out of our last workshop and then placed into the policy that y'all have in y'all's hands today, and that was recommended to the city council.
So Brianna, just quickly, so I know we're leading with values-based, but I think that's the language and framework you're giving based off the discussion that we had. I think at the time when we looked at the development agreement, I think it was extremely lengthy, right? And so it was hard for us to kind of synthesize what information we were given, and then we weren't able to actually ask, viable questions, right? So you came back to us and said, okay, go ahead and take a look at the development agreement. So I think it was discussed that we would take out a lot of the repetitive verbiage that was in the ordinances themselves. Whether we decide, or the city council decides, if DA is valuable or not, the warrants or not. I think from a planning and zoning perspective, we really wanted to ensure that there was a mechanism in place, DA or not, that we can assure that density limits, infrastructure, and fiscal sustainability is addressed without having to provide planning and zoning 100-page document, right? So just to add on to the conversation.
Yes, and that's, I'm so happy you're trying to do this, yes, but planning and zoning did go through this, and at first, that's the first question I asked whenever we sat down for that workshop was, do we think we need one? Is that something that we think we need? And as we went through the values or everything stated in that former policy, they did agree that we needed one. I would love to give councils what y'all thoughts are on that. I know we heard negatives, but Mr. Keating, what do you think about?
No, actually, let's go down the line here.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Start
Go
with
ahead.
Bob.
Bob, you want to start?
Let's start, Bob.
We're supposed to have open discussion, so not everybody.
All right,
has to
that's
give
fine.
input.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Go ahead, Mr. Clark.
I do feel like we need a development agreement policy. There are a number of things, like you just walked through, that we cannot regulate with our ordinances that we certainly have opinions on. And on top of that, it allows us to have a place where we can easily record sort of what went well and what did not from previous development agreement negotiations. We can know sort of, okay, if we really like that one, but we would have liked to get these, let's mark this as what we'd really like to be our product going out of some future negotiation. And that makes it a lot easier for staff because they don't have to come with every single thing to council. They know better what our final output is desired to look like, especially on things like design standards, whether that's sort of the technical stuff or the aesthetic stuff. There are things the city cannot require. When you look at dedication, or you look at how street connectivity or walking trails, those are things that we can't put in our ordinances, certainly not to the extent we can put them in a development agreement. And so it's valuable to have a note of what are the things we want. And that also, when council comes around and updates all its policies, is an easy place to say, if there's a new council, actually, we don't like what that previous council was doing. Let's change it and mark what this new council would want. And it puts it front and center in a less stressful time than when there is someone knocking on the door. So I think we do need one of these.
Well, I'm just going to respond to that one really quick. I'm going to take two developments. We have a recent development that's fixing to get under construction that doesn't have a development agreement and complies with our ordinances, and they're building $1 million houses in that development. And we have developments that we have literally given away the farm to get whatever the developer wanted. And then we have other ones that we're working on other things. So the example of Upmore Homes out there in Country Village Unit 4, that part is a prime example of our ordinances worked. And we didn't need all of these things. So I believe if they would have wanted a development agreement, they would have proposed, I want this, I want smaller lots. And then the negotiations on, well, you want smaller lots? We want this. And the negotiations back and forth through a development agreement, not laying the cards on the table, making, for years we've talked about we don't want to be any town USA. We don't want the developments to look the same. But yet with the development agreement, you're making that. You're leaning towards making them all look like these type developments. What's wrong with Mr. Upmore's? What's wrong with the development he's making with 12,000 square foot lots? What's wrong with the streets that he's making over there? It's in your neighborhood, and they add tremendous value to this community. They followed the rules. They didn't ask for something similar.
I would only counter that, Mayor, by saying
I'm just asking that.
I agree with David in the respect that as we went through this
Sure.
previous agreement, the continuity between councils, between members on P and Z is of the utmost importance. You can see within the next 3 months the changeover that we're going to have, not only on the council, but as a result of the movement from P and Z to council, and we're going to have to fill in from the bottom.
Sure.
The importance of having a written document that starts off that conversation that you're talking about with that developer, I think it just opens up the door to show that Castroville is receptive to development. As you said yourself, you're not adverse to development.
Right.
Neither am I. I certainly want it to be controlled, as you do.
Yes, sir.
But the importance of having continuity through a written document, because without this, then it falls back on Joe happens to be on the council this year, Bob happens to be on the council next year. As these developers come in from year to year to year, it's Joe's deal this year, it's Bob's deal
Sure.
the next year.
Sure.
There has to be something of a historical basis to lead that development from year to year, from decade to decade, from generation to generation.
Right.
I mean, I've been in the Castroville area now for going on 35 years. I'm still not considered a Castrovillean.
You're from
Yeah, I'm an outsider still,
Like me.
but, having lived in a number of other places and seen how development can be a boon, I've seen how development can be wonderful. Okay, I want Castroville to be on the wonderful side of that equation, where those who are currently here can have a say, and our new neighbors coming in have a say, have some influence.
Sure.
Because obviously, Castroville doesn't look like it did in 1854.
No.
You know, so the importance of having a written guidepost, a written direction, a map to go by to begin these conversations. And really, that's all this is a conversation. It's not a cut and dry. Obviously, this document starts out, and that developer still has to come back with his bag of details and say, well, this is what we're offering. That's when the negotiation starts.
Well, in that respect, I just want to share with you, I believe this document that the P and Z come up with, I watched the meetings, and I like your approach on this. So I lean more towards this, the value base, because it's not directing, you'll do this, you'll do this. It's saying we value this. We suggest, we recommend these things. So I would not be objectionable to something like this. What I'm objectionable to is we get in the details of thou shalt do this for this.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that's all open on the table for negotiations.
Right. This is just opens the door, I think. This is
argue.
Somebody's calling card like, hey, I'm so-and-so.
I won't argue,
Yeah.
but it's the developer's responsibility to come to us with what they want, and it opens the negotiations up.
Absolutely. But I think it's important to have that
Yes, sir.
starting point.
You asked what's wrong with Country Village Estates, and while that is a great addition to the neighborhood, I would note several things as somebody who walked through that development every day while most of those houses were being built. And that is that those houses absolutely comply with the International Building Code, and I am not attempting to imply otherwise. But there are definitely things that I would have done differently if I was having a house built. Now, oftentimes, our future citizens are not here when their house is being built, because these are speculative builds. A developer buys the land, they chop it up, a home builder builds it, and then sells it. These aren't self-builds. But the quality of the framing, the utter lack of insulation, these buildings are not what these people would build if they had the choice. But we have the opportunity to get out in front and ask for some of these changes that would dramatically improve the quality of the build and the quality of life of the people in it, but take a ton of work and cost to do afterwards. Something as simple as freeze-proof faucets. They cost $10 more. No house in Castroville has them. Everybody has to drip their faucets and worry about pipes bursting. Or we could say in a development agreement policy, hey, if you're trying to build something nice, we want you to put in freeze-proof faucets because it does freeze here every year. And it costs them $10 more versus costing a future resident hundreds or thousands of dollars to put it in. And so I think there is absolutely opportunities to put specific things that are very fiddly, that we can't require in our code and in our ordinances, but result in a much better result for the future residents of that neighborhood.
Got it. And I don't want to take over. I want to move on, but I will tell you, in Country Village, every home out there is a custom-built home.
In the old part of the neighborhood.
That's exactly right. They're custom-built homes for what people wanted at the time. Almost every one of them are there. But we move into Alsatian Oaks, and they're not. They may have a different facade, but they're the same homes. Okay, go ahead. Did you want to say something, Mr. Lee?
Well, I'll wait until it comes back around.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No, do we want to hold?
Yeah, we want to go ahead. You guys go ahead.
Well, I mean, so I do believe, Mr. Mayor, that the values-based is warranted. I think establishing guardrails.
Okay.
Guardrails would be beneficial. But to Councilman Work's point, I don't know if that level of detail is warranted, and that's what we've been struggling from a P&Z perspective.
Well, it's not warranted and it's not possible. I mean, that's. But see, I put something like that in the policy, something like that.
You just for clarity, you can put, development agreements can be incredibly detailed where you specify those types of things. On the reverse side, I don't know if you can specify winter or freeze-proof faucets. I literally don't know.
When you get down to the actual, not in a policy,
right.
When you get down to actual negotiating development agreement, everything's on the table. And that's when you would bring stuff like that up. Okay, you want a 5,000 square foot lot. We want frost-proof faucets. I mean, those are extremes, but those are the details that come in a development agreement, not necessarily in an upfront policy, in my opinion.
I gotta make, Madam Acting Chair, you need to mention that the chair entered the meeting for the minutes.
Jim Welch, I don't know who he's in, has entered the meeting at 5:26.
Okay.
Did you want to?
When it's my turn to talk,
Okay, Bob, did you want?
I will talk.
Okay.
I can talk now, it's fine. Our development agreement was rescinded because both council knows why. My particular issue with the development agreement is it reeked of offering incentives to developers to do things. And the draft that was sent to us from P&Z had too much of that same sense of language to me. I would not open the conversation with a developer saying at the bottom, because we want you to do this, we're willing to give you money. That money has to come from somebody, okay? And those people are going to get a break on taxes or something, while the rest of us have to provide the funds to take care of the costs and everything else to do business, okay? And primarily, the people in the development benefit from the additional things that are done for them than the rest of the city. But anyway, I think the developers, and Mr. Griggs knows this, they know exactly what they want to build, how much money they want to make out of it, and they know they got to sell it, okay? The property out here is very expensive. They're not going to build Ellison homes out here. I doubt it. I doubt they want to do that because they want to. They have a reputation. So does Ellison. They have a reputation. They want that to be good, and they want referrals. They want people to buy their stuff. They're not going to build junk. I just don't believe they're going to build junk here. The land is too expensive. Anyway, developers, I believe, are specialists at getting the most they can from the place they're going to build in order to increase their profit. I mean, wouldn't you do the same thing if you were the developer? Okay. And so I think we need to bring in as much revenue as we can on these developments to maintain our infrastructure. Okay, right now, we're giving away 80 cents on the dollar to Alsatian Oaks that really needs to be coming into the city to fix our infrastructure, but we don't get it.
This is part of the reason why we're
I understand. So,
But Mr. Lee, I just want to make one comment.
Surely.
This value-based one doesn't say the incentives are there for you. They said they may be available.
And it's not till the end of the
And it's not till the end of the
I-
document, and that's part of the negotiation process.
who cares if it's at the end of the beginning?
Well, but it doesn't specify. The point is,
Doesn't
it's
specify
very
what they are.
generic. Yeah, it's very
Well,
generic.
I will say I had the opportunity to read Bob's edit, and having been involved in our original document, I absolutely have no problem whatsoever with the wording changes that Bob had. While they are a little bit more exacting with, the word using expected versus some of the language that we have. As far as the incentive part, obviously, like Mr. Dixon was saying, it came in at the end. I think from our committee standpoint, obviously there will be some give and take. Now, whether or not that's in monetary ways or whatever, as the mayor said, I think it comes in, that would come in much later anyway in the discussion.
Well, when you look at incentives, an incentive can be as simple as, we're willing to give you a 5,000 square foot lot, but you're going to give us this in exchange.
But
It's almost anything's on the table.
Going back to the actual document that we have, I have no problem
Sure.
with Bob's edits at all. As a matter of fact, I think, they're more exacting. Obviously using the word expected in most of those statements, I know it adds to that value statement.
Anyway, if I could finish my points.
Okay.
We already make allowances by having a PUD, okay? That lets you vary from the subdivision ordinance. I have no problem with the intent behind the document that was P&Z came up with, other than take away, we kind of like to have this we expect this from you because of who we are, what we stand for, our history, and you have a reputation as a company, and you live on referrals and so forth and so on. So I would prefer to make it an expectation for them, and they can price their homes in order to meet those expectations. And then, as I said in some of the paper I gave you, if there's a compelling reason that particular development has something we want beyond what would normally be expected, then we can take a look. But I would prefer that we hear what the developer wants to do. It comes to P&Z and council before we start entering negotiations, okay? Because once staff starts talking to them, it sounds good to us, we'll take it to council, but they don't have to approve it. The developer already knows, staff already supports this. Maybe I ought to just hold my line. And so I prefer to know what it is they want to do, have us look at it and say, yay, nay, whatever. And before we go back and start deciding we want to do something differently. And so really the question comes down to annexation or not annexation, doesn't it? And so forth. But anyway, let me see here.
We're going to go through the documents, so just very briefly, so do you want to get to that? I saw they made comments on each of them. Do you want to just go through those comments when we get there?
Well, they were given to everybody. Most people don't want to hear me talk anymore. And
it's just that we're not talking all of them.
okay, and basically, I didn't really vary from any of the desires that were in that document. I just tried to word it as an expectation because of the quality of your development. I put in another introduction there about what Castroville is, where it comes from, why it's important, so forth and so on. Okay, but the points, I just changed some of the things to say, this is what we expect from you. And I took out things like, we'll be glad to give you money if you don't want to do what we want. That's just anathema to me. Okay, you have to earn that. And as some people know, I call 4 communities around here. Mostly I talk to the community development person, the city planner. That would have been Helotes, Cibolo, New Braunfels, and Bernie. And I asked if they were doing incentives for builders. Not a single one was given incentive to builders. A lot of them had more definition of their expectations in their ordinances. Okay, and I understand that's why we were looking up doing the UDO and all that. I think our subdivision ordinance needs updating. Okay, it really does. I think the development agreement, as Ms. Griffin said, it kind of gives you some continuity about here's our expectations until we make those changes to those ordinances. But my issue was the wording and the proposed from planning and zoning you need to do it, not be so conciliatory toward, please take advantage of us. You know, hey, this is our ball game to an extent. You need our libraries, you need our police, you need our, this, that, you need our parks, you need all the rest of that kind of stuff. And we want you to be part of the community, but we want you to pull your load. And so that's essentially my 2 bits.
Mark?
Come my next 2 bits.
If you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, we've been going back and forth.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Trying to catch up.
So the ball's in your court, and I was going to ask Marcus, but the ball's in your court on who you want to, who's next. It's back to you. We're just having a lot of open conversation.
Can we refocus for a second?
Sure.
Well, Brianna asked me a question,
Sure.
Yeah, I did open it up to you.
and I haven't been able to respond.
Sure.
to it.
Go ahead.
But we only have, by the way, the mayor would like to end this meeting by 7 o'clock. But to formally end it, I'm going to make a motion that this meeting end at 7 o'clock.
I second.
And now we vote on that.
All
and
in
the meeting
favor?
will end.
Aye.
All right. Okay.
Robert's Rules of Order. The second thing is, the question you asked me was, do we believe in having a development agreement policy? And I think everybody, and I think also the mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, everybody agrees that we should have a development agreement policy. Brian was very eloquent in the way he said that, yes, but it's not, don't be real specific, so I think we're all agree to that. I also agree to that. And I keep looking, we have an hour and 25 minutes. So however we can speed this along to finish this up. Two things though, important to remember. I totally disagree with you, Bob. I think a DB neighborhood can come butt up to city property right outside in DTJ, and we can't stop it, and they can put in quarter-acre homes, and they're doing it between us and San Antonio. When you say this land is too valuable, look at the thousands of those starter homes that are going up between us. You go up to these communities I just was in Kerrville. They're putting 2,000 unit neighborhoods up there, DB Horton Homes.
DR.
DR Horton Homes, excuse me, thank you. And they are little bitty lots, and they are very economy minded, and they're going to happen, and there's nothing we can stop it. So the incentive here is to try to bring those in and get them the promise to put in a little better than what they can do just right outside the city. And there's incentive for them to do that. So right now, we've all agreed that, yes, we need this document. So what's now the quickest way to go through this? And I'm going to throw that back to Brianna.
Okay, so just in the vein of the conversation we've already had, when planning and zoning had this workshop, that was the main point of this document, was to provide as much flexibility for council as possible. They didn't want to tie y'all's hands in any way, or any future councils in any way. And I think we spoke about that a lot, was that anything with details, faucets, things of that sort, incentives, those can all be hammered out, and that's why they're not spoken to in great length in this document. So there's a reason why I put incentives at the very end of this, because I don't want that to be the driving force of this conversation right now. I really want us to try and figure out the values for this document, what we expect to see out of this document, and at the end we can look at incentives and what that language looks like. And then I also think that in the future, P3 is going to give City Council kind of a crash course on what incentives look like in a 380 agreement, a PID agreement, because I know all that terminology is a bit crazy. And that may be something that after y'all get that presentation from P3, that maybe y'all's ideas and thoughts about this will change. So I don't want to harp too much on the incentive side of it, because really what we're trying to do is establish the values that we want to see in this document. Is that okay?
Thank you. I think you're on the right track, because also when I talk about stuff like this, I don't think we should put everything out that we're willing to offer incentives on. That's items that they need to propose and come back to P&Z with a recommendation, because if we lay out details of what these are, no disrespect to you, but it gets the staff going down to almost making the development agreement before it comes to the folks that should be reviewing it and talking about it. And I don't mean to be rude on that. It just, let those come out from the developer. This is what I'd like from you. It's okay, we put it to P&Z and flush it out. I like that.
And then I just also want to say that I know Country Village, they go by all the subdivision ordinance, but that is a very unique because it was already in our city limits. So they had to abide by. I'm not saying that they would have done it any other way. I don't think Jack would have, but they had to abide by this, and it was only 30 acres, if I'm not mistaken.
But they could have done a pit
Yeah.
or putt. They could have done a putt.
They could have asked for a putt.
Because all you had to have is 3 acres in the city to do it.
Yeah, so they could have asked for a putt.
They could have done it.
Decided just to go through. But all these other developments that are happening in our ETJ directly next to us are massive, massive acreage. And the reason why I think some of these values are important is because things like land use, like you should not just want a sea of homes. You should want a commercial establishment. Right now, those are things that y'all don't require in your ordinances. Those are things we can work towards in the subdivision ordinance in the future. But as of right now, those aren't requirements. So I just want to say there is a little bit of difference between country village estates and all the other development happening on our outside our city limits. So okay, so values. So like I said, we just went through these. Actually, before we turn the page, do we all agree that these are values of fiscal sustainability, community character, quality design, connectivity, civic space, transparent process? I don't want to harp on any one of these too much, but can we all agree at some base level that those are all important in our community?
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes, great, that's all I needed, okay. Okay, and then, so this is significant language, and the reason I put significant, because these are things that you can actually incorporate into your city code that you don't currently do, but planning and zoning found that they were important. And so first is connectivity, and that means that these subdivisions, these large scale subdivisions, that they have to connect one another, because right now typically they don't. They have one entrance in, one entrance out, and you can't get to the next subdivision over. If they have a park, if they have a library, if they have a school, you have to go all the way out to a main collector to get to that next subdivision. So connectivity was one thing that they spoke on. Underground utilities, we can regulate that. That can be mandated for our ordinance. Right now we do not, and I think it's important because from a maintenance standpoint and an aesthetic standpoint, underground utilities is typically the way to go. It's the more modern thing. Landscaping, we don't have requirements on landscaping, so there's street trees, neighborhood landscaping design. All of these things can be included in the development agreement policy, but like I said, it doesn't have to be tree every 10 feet. It can just be, these are things that we're looking for, you know? Dark sky lighting, that's been a huge component in the past few years, and I think that everybody wants to keep this community feeling as rural as possible. The only way to do that is to mitigate the lighting around here and make sure that it is dark skies compliant. Street signage enhancements, that's just one thing that has been, we've seen throughout all the development agreements, and I think a lot of people are happy with the signage they see now, Station Oaks, so that's something that they thought was important. Housing variety, we did talk about this, I think, at length, and it's not saying that we're promoting density, but that there could be a variety of different housing throughout the development. And then block length and layout, we spoke on how important it is to have not such long block lengths, and that we need to make sure there's that connected layout amongst the subdivision. I know that was a lot of talking, but planning and zoning, since we already spoke about these, do y'all have anything to add to that on why maybe something, one of these stood out, or why, I guess maybe your case it comes. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, okay.
These are important things, but they're not really called out in the proposed development agreement policy, right?
They are spoken to in the development agreement policy, so they're not saying you have to do these things, but these are things that we're looking for.
But very, very generically.
Very generic.
Yeah, but as I just clarifying again, make sure I heard you right. These are also all things that future policymakers could put this into our code.
I understand.
We could codify that if that's something that the council says, this is important. It's important enough. We'll just require it. To your point, it's already in our code. Just follow our code.
We can update our subdivision ordinance to require these things. That is correct.
Okay.
But not necessarily in a development policy.
Right.
But right now, I guess you're asking, I guess you all agree to this. Do I like this? I'm going to say, yes, I like what you put in here that's in this document.
Yeah, because if there's anything that y'all feel like needs to be pulled out, this would be the time to say that, because we're just looking for direction. If none of these resonate with you as a group, then that's the time to pull these things out. So,
Well, I think we liked language because these are the questions we would be asking developers, right? Recurring questions. So that's kind of what it stuck with us.
You have something?
Yeah, on the landscaping, I know that we had issues, and we're what, stage 4 right now?
Mhm.
And Alsatian Oaks, where we're requiring them to put in grass, so they do St. Augustine, which is insane in this country, when you think about the amount of water that takes. So but when you say landscaping, so we could also offer, indigenous or xeriscape or whatever that is to get off that dime on the water.
That's correct. There's no, like I said, there is no exact regulatory language in the one that was presented to you because of that flexibility. So if you think that at this point they need more xeriscape, or we want that to be a percentage of xeriscape or native grass, that's something that could be negotiated in that development agreement.
That's correct. Everything's on the table.
Yeah.
Tina, did you have anything? You wanna-
Oh,
I'm sorry, I'm not going back and forth. Yeah, we do this.
Go ahead, Dave.
Go ahead, Tina.
Well, I'm a big fan of the underground utilities and the dark sky lighting, because storms come along, and if we have the utilities underground, it helps so much and relieve the problems in that of trees being blown in and having to worry about tree trimming and getting them out of the transformers and everything. The dark sky, that's why a lot of people move out here. They like the darkness. They like to be able to sit outside. Oh, look, there's the sky. Oh, look. So the kids, to let the kids run around and see the sky and everything like we did when we were children. It's a beautiful thing. You know, that's.
David, did you have something else? Sorry.
I do. So I had a question about block length and layout. That does not appear in the document that you guys recommended to council.
Sorry. Okay, well then.
No.
Disregard.
Because I have lots to say about block length and layout, but it wasn't in there, so I wasn't sure.
It should be in there. I mean, like I said, these are all the language is, this is what we would hope to see. If that's something that y'all would hope to see is more, is better, is. I think it's probably in here as like connectivity, because we just want to make sure that it's all connected together, maybe not specific in block length, because we're not providing regulations for those things.
I believe during our
Page-
conversations, that really had more to do with
Page
the
7.
connectivity between the subdivisions and how those blocks would then have to be configured.
This is the one that's
It's in page 7.
This is the 2 pages.
It's being presented,
This is the one.
I guess.
Yeah.
This is what.
All right.
And I'm sorry, I
That's what
put
they
it
were.
here because
This is.
Okay.
so it's not actually.
Well, that's layout.
So I have just like a quick comment to most of these. So on connectivity, these comments were shared with city council a long time ago. I think they ended up printed out at a meeting where I wasn't here and handed to you. But they were not pulled back out for this meeting, and I apologize because I could have sent them to Deborah. But on connectivity, I had noted that I'd like to see a little bit more specificity there about connecting to existing areas and stubbing out to undeveloped areas. That's something that Country Village Estates did not do very well. It does not have good connectivity to the undeveloped areas around it. And so, for example, there will be despite there being a home in Country Village Estates that could throw a baseball out their back door and break a window in Alsatian Oaks, there's going to be no connectivity between those two neighborhoods because Country Village Estates did not stub out to the east at all. And there's also only going to be one connection to the north, even though there's at least 4 different roads that go right up to that northern boundary and then stop or turn into a cul-de-sac. So a little bit of stronger language around like street layout or blocks in the connectivity, I think would be good. On underground utilities, in addition to them being underground, I would love to see all utilities located on publicly owned right-of-way instead of in easements in the back of people's yards. We already have it, or at the very least on an easement on the front, But if we're going to have land that can't have anything done with it other than remain open, it'd be easier to have that in the front than in the back. And I know that utilities easements and drainage easements are some of the most frustrating things for a new homeowner. And it's always great when you can find a lot, like the overwhelming majority of them inside the horseshoe, that don't have them. And then for housing variety, I heard Ms. Solis say that it's not talking about density. I think we should be encouraging a variety of small multifamily buildings, as this allows more people to help support the cost of our infrastructure while creating places for more people in different stages of life. This does not require any changes to the CZO. It just requires us to encourage developers to zone some parts of the neighborhood as RC, general residential. That zoning still allows single-family homes, but it permits duplexes and small apartment buildings, things that are house-sized and house-shaped, just have multiple front doors. And doing that dramatically increases the ability of the neighborhood to sustain itself over time. So
David?
I think that a mix of home styles and types would be a great change to make to that item.
And David, I'm not going to argue with you any of those things, but those are things that could be included in a development agreement, not necessarily an upfront policy, because you're laying down details. And the policy is to get the conversation going as we start with what our values are and what our directions are and what we want. Most developers nowadays, because of the cost of everything, they're going to want other things. They're not going to go back, even though I like what our ordinance is, the bigger lots, but not all developers want to do that because they need the smaller lots for more houses for a return on their investment. So they're looking for those type deals. And so the things you're talking about are things the city can use in a development agreement negotiations.
Yeah, can
in my opinion.
So, respectfully, I hear what you're saying on the first two things I said, but I strongly disagree on a variety of housing types.
Okay.
That's a 2-word change to an existing sentence. We already have in there variety of house facades or styles. Okay. I think it's saying and types is totally in keeping with the character of the document. And that is something that I care about far more than dark sky lighting, which is incredibly nitty gritty and specific by comparison.
Yeah, I was going to mention this real quick, just to keep us on topic and maybe keep it at the high level. It sounds like as a group, y'all have supported the concept of a values-based approach with less specificity. And David, you're bringing up a lot of specificity with different things. And one of the things I've seen on staff, and certainly it's pretty apparent to some of the PNC members, as Brian mentioned, is that just in the last 5 years, there's been a little bit of it's felt a little bit like a tug of war between the policymakers about what this is important when we talk about block links, et cetera, and then, well, that actually doesn't matter at all, that kind of stuff. So keeping it at a higher level will actually be helpful to everyone involved. And what I would suggest is to do exactly what you just did, David, which is let's focus on the value level if everybody's comfortable in that area, which it sounds like you are, and then look for areas where you feel like your values are not being expressed without being overly specific. Does that make sense? And I think what you just offered is a perfect example of that, saying, you know what, my value is housing types or housing variety in the types, not just the facades. And I'd really like to make sure that if everybody else agrees, because that's the other part of that, right, is that everybody needs to reach a consensus that that's also important. If that's important, then staff will try to figure out, okay, then what does that language need to look like? Because I think you said we aren't going to try to do the language tonight.
Because I don't know if the best way to translate into this, but I can find a better word that expresses what you're trying to say. So
Right.
I would like to make a suggestion, and I think because it goes back into the council's court as far as getting this moved along, that if someone on the council would like to make a motion that we accept the document tonight with the edits that Bob put into it, give it back to staff, let him refine that, and move forward with staff.
Before I would ask for city council, I want to see the finished document before that with the edits. I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with that.
I don't know if it needs a motion tonight.
Yeah,
Well, you can't. This is not.
I
This
don't
is
think
a
so,
workshop.
but I think that moves forward with a lot of things. Jim, I'd really like to hear from your perspective, because that's what you do for a living is developments.
I think Scott brought a very good point in speaking to what Councilman Mertz was mentioning here is, when we as P&Z discussed this, we view this as called a la carte menu, something that would serve as a tool for city staff to work with developers and for developers to look at and say, okay, these are the values that the city appreciates and what they want in a development agreement. Then the developer would have it on there to come up with their plan and present it to the city. And so even though, let's say I didn't agree with something Councilman Mertz said.
Unsurprising.
It could be included in here. I have no issues with that, because the intent of this is to be high-level concepts and to be a list of specific items which we may want to see.
It's to open the conversation.
So I think the conversation where we're heading tonight, catching up on it, is headed in a good direction, in my opinion. Let's keep it high level. Let's list the values and put it on the developer to get creative and come to the city with something that we want, as opposed to specifying exactly what we want from them.
Make a clarification.
Yeah, excuse me, sir. Yes, sir.
We were provided two documents tonight, both labeled development agreement. One 16 pages long, deja vu all over. I've seen that document before in the UDO. Are we discussing anything in that whatsoever?
No,
You
it
just
was just
provided.
a reference of where it
Okay,
came from.
all right, but we're just
Yeah.
discussing the two.
The one you're talking about is the last 2 pages.
Okay,
Yes.
I think to me it still boils down to how much are you willing to give of other people's money in order to make an incentive? How do you draw the line that, this is just too far for me, I can't afford it.
Well, but
And so,
that would come during the.
well, I understand, but that's a realization that needs to be understood. And there could be compelling reasons to do some things. Maybe it's a unique piece of property. They could do something that we really want for the whole community,
Well,
that people ever drive.
The bottom line is that policymakers at the time are going to make.
That's what I'm saying.
You all can't dictate
I would
that, even if you
hope we
wanted to.
follow a similar path, but that would be up to the ones in charge at the time.
And no one in this room is going to control that, frankly.
Right.
I understand.
Just like the direction today is not necessarily the same direction it was this time last year.
Right.
So it's how we work moving forward.
I like a comment.
Good.
Yes, sir.
I agree with, like Brian, I agree with what Bob has put in here.
Right there.
And then I agree with Brianna that you can take what David said and you all come up with whatever that is. But as a consensus agreement, not to make a motion, I agree with those two items. And if the rest of us agree with that, they have direction to go forward. If you all disagree with that, then let it be known. So, because we're halfway through this thing now, but we could end it early. But I'm happy with what I've heard here. I'm happy with what
Can I have
Yeah, please.
Troy? You do a lot of commercial stuff. How would this work? Is there anything we should also plug in for the commercial side? Because that's also a part of a development agreement.
You can have a commercial development only, and you still look at that. But
I think it encourages to bring commercial into the neighborhoods so that there's, but as far as details of that, I would think that has to be picked up in the ordinances, and there's no reference to the ordinances in this document.
well, you can have, for example, the recent one that's come to us, the commercial. It's a straight commercial development. So. And there's a proposed development agreement, and it's a negotiation thing back and forth.
I was just
Same
making
type
sure
thing.
because we're here talking about these items, 30,000 foot items. I want to make sure we're not. Maybe there's one additional thing for the commercial side that we need to put at the 30,000 level.
Well, I don't know, Brianna, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we address in our rules lot sizes for commercials. We concentrate more on residential than we do on commercial, so it's kind of like a wide open thing on commercial development.
We do have lot sizes for commercial
Okay.
building setbacks, but that's also kind of new about just the development
It's-
negotiations and the PUD also
Sure.
did speak to that whenever
Okay.
they go for the PUD further, approved plat plan. So,
The bottom line is, I'm just making a general statement. I'm eating my words from earlier. I like the value added thing. I like to start the conversation. I like what you just said. It gives a, okay, Mr. Developer, this is the values, what we're looking for. Go forth and present us with a proposal. That's my whole goal here. So, and then then that proposal comes to P and Z. P and Z flushes it out, makes a recommendation to council.
I think it would be very hard to dictate commercial versus residential, because when those developers come here, they know what they're,
Okay.
Right.
yeah, they know what they're at.
I just want to make sure that we're covering not, just residential, but commercial as well. That way we're doing a CYA
And
type
when
thing.
I'm talking about development agreements at the P and Z level, now, I want to say this because some of when you get down to the negotiations, 380 agreements, different that's more of a legal stuff with the city. But the P and Z's role is to flesh out what we don't want. And then the final negotiations come with city council. Does that make sense?
yeah, it does.
Yeah.
That's why I think this value document holds a lot of value. No, because they can go through each of these, and like I said, it's not regulatory, but this could literally be a checklist. Are they annexing into the city limits? Yeah, they are. Let me look at the design and building standards. What are they offering there? Oh, this is what they're offering. Do you like this? You don't like that? A fiscal, like you just go down and you just say, does it meet this value? And if it doesn't, that's something they can bring to the attention when y'all do y'all negotiations with them.
Right. Yeah. Y'all know P and Z. Y'all know we hired a group P3, which they do development agreements. That's what they do. So right now they're reviewing all the ones we have. So to help actually do the negotiations straight up when it gets to that point. But if I'm wrong by saying this, when it comes to P and Z, it's like I say, y'all doing heavy lifting out there to flush out. No, go away. Or yeah, this looks good. Let's forward it on. Something like that. Does that make sense? With using that.
It would be up to the developer at that point. Is when let's just say a development agreement did come before and planning and zoning had a lot of negative things to say about it. They didn't agree with it, didn't meet any of these values.
Sure.
It would be up to the developer if they want to go back and bring that to the drawing board to see if it's going to meet some of these values, or if it still wants to bring it to city council to see what city council says. That's it. That's up to them what they want to do, but hopefully they would take the value of what planning and zoning says based off of what we have in this document, and
Sure.
go back to the drawing board and then provide something better.
I like that.
Yeah.
Good. Kirsten, did you have anything?
No.
Anything else?
Mm.
Phil? Mr. Murs?
Not at this time.
Mr. Lee?
This is a tangent issue that just came up recently, that I'm just gonna say it anyway, whether it applies or not. We only get water for living units. So all Esplanades, all other green areas that they have out there, we get no water for that. We need to think about that as we work with these developers, that we get water rights for all that other area they're gonna water.
I'm going to answer that because I read the rules too, and it's not by residential lot, it's by equivalent dwelling units or LEUs.
Yeah.
And LEUs, irrigation counts as an LEU. So there are things on that. You can get water for that. Well, but that's a whole nother issue that comes out in the development agreements and the ordinances. And I'll just broad stroke this. I came from a water utility. Okay. As long as I have anything to say, we're not giving away any type of water service. It's the developer's cost to put it in. It's the developer's cost to pay us their impact fees. It's the developer's cost to provide us the water rights. Find something else for an incentive, but don't ask me to incentivize our utilities because that puts an unfair financial burden on the rest of the community. Period. Okay, thank you. That's my position on that. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about a development agreement policy.
I still have anything to add? No, I'm not going to go through the rest.
Pardon me? Mr. Chairman,
Bill,
did you want to go around any of your folks for any other comments or?
Yeah, that's definitely up to them.
Yeah, no, honestly, I have more of a comment, because everything she's relaying to y'all is everything that we've already discussed and came up with. So really, and truthfully, everything's right there in front of you. And just, on that note, real quick on Mr. Mers, on the block length and layout, even though it's not in here, part of the reasoning, or on the block length, I think that, from my understanding, what I remember, it had to do with the connectivity. We were wanting to staff and go like, we don't want the block lengths to be more than 400 feet. And that part of the connectivity was lengthening the size of the blocks of roads. That way egress for emergency vehicles, citizens, whoever. That's why, I don't know why it is in this. That's what my understanding was, is that the connectivity part also kind of covered that part. I'm lengthening the length of blocks, because on some of these subdivisions, that road winds and winds and winds, and like you said, it's one way in, way out. We, from what I remember, is we want to put like a limit on footages, 400 foot a road, connect to the next road. Another, or something, if I remember right, that's what we were discussing at that point, as far as blocking. So I just wanted to point that out, because you're requiring that.
Shorten the blocks, do away with the cul-de-sacs,
Length of the
make
road,
the
yes.
loops, make the connectivity to future development. Things
May-
like
may I
that are all
reply?
good. Yes, sir, please.
I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I just like something a little bit more explicit in there so that they don't see connectivity and think, I will put two 30-foot long concrete pads at opposite corners and sprinkle Wi-Fi emitters, and that'll take care of connectivity.
What, if I can just since we have this up still, and I spoke to this earlier, but one of the things that would be helpful is council and P&Z, since we're together, to agree to what the process will look like for updating the ordinances to include those things that mutually you've agreed are important. Because right now, if our code doesn't have this in there and someone were to come in and they didn't want to do a development agreement, we're just going to follow your code. Well, if these things are important, but they're not in our code, then they don't have to do them. And I would suggest that if they are important, if you think they're important, then we should put it in the code. But it would probably be beneficial to go ahead and talk about, well, how do y'all want to go about doing that? And how do you want to charge that? I would assume the council will say, well, P&Z, why don't y'all kind of prioritize these and decide which are most important, and then let's work with staff and put together some language and update them little by little based on those priorities. But that's how I'd approach it, but I would be interested to hear what y'all.
Well, honestly, I know it's the subdivision ordinance, just like the comprehensive zoning ordinance, are big tasks. They're big asks, but you bite off
a
little bit here and there and stuff like that. I would, and I know you guys do.
Correct me if I'm wrong, we're currently
Yes.
do some of that with the sign ordinances.
I think you are.
Talking about. So
Yeah,
if
we're
it's,
on the sign ordinance, just some language for the temporary storage and things.
L-
We're working through
little
this.
bit at a time.
yeah,
Little
well,
bites.
you know,
But-
how you
but-
eat an elephant, you
But
know, one bite
no,
at a time.
no, I understand that. But along that same line, as you get sections, for example, that you feel comfortable with, then forward them on so we can get them flushed through legal review, and then bring them to us, because we could take a subdivision ordinance and we can amend it every meeting if we wanted to. It's
Don't
different.
tempt me, Bruce.
It's different than the zoning ordinance that requires a bunch of notices and things like that. So we
ask the council,
sure.
individual members, as you go through your neighborhoods. I mean, for us on P&Z, obviously you talk to your neighbors. As you go through your districts and you find an issue, please send it to us, because we'd like to get that feedback down from y'all.
Absolutely.
So we can start hitting on those. I mean, we've kind of talked amongst ourselves. We've had topics like the sign ordinance and the storage that came up within our committee. We could certainly use y'all's input, because y'all talk to your neighbors. I mean, you're out there in your districts every day, so except for Bob.
Well, Mr. Griffin, I'm going to add to that, because I'm going to echo to anybody that's watching here a part of what I say almost every meeting. Contact us. Tell us your stuff. Let us have your information. There's no wrong statement, wrong question. We'll listen to everybody, and then let's come together with an approach on what we believe is in the best. So no, I echo. I applaud that. Yes, but with y'all as a planning and zoning commission, and I appreciate it. You start looking at things like that, bites at a time. Get it to us, and let's make these adjustments, because that's how we get it done. We don't have to do it all at once, and we don't have to wait till the end. we can do sections at a time and move
But
on.
I do like Mr. Dixon's,
Yeah.
in his direction, if there are things that we've already talked about in regards to this new development.
Let's work on it.
Obviously, storage is not gonna be a big thing when it comes to the new developments, but these new development issues that are gonna be coming up, those are probably gonna need to take priority on our committee, I think, and on P and Z.
Well, and I'm just saying, I would prioritize these. I'd say, y'all, tell us what you think is most important. And then I would strongly recommend both bodies that you focus on in a priority ranked, not the thing that's the easiest thing to fix necessarily, but what's most important to you to fix. So we get those things done, because development's coming, growth is coming. And I think the more that happens, the more threatened we are as a community. And it'd be good to get some of this stuff done.
Well, we don't want the issues to die. We want to keep working on a positive way towards it. That's the only way we're going to do it. Have the discussions and work through them and come up with the changes as we go.
Brianna, do you have, I'm sure within your brain, you're probably already picking out some, so.
Well, I think that dark sky lighting that's something part of every development that comes in, and that's something that people actively, like new commercial buildings that come on, like things that infill could actually be affected by. Because once they put the lights in, it's hard to get them to change them or take them out. But if you can already start establishing what that dark sky lighting is, the standards for your signage, which we're already doing, we're looking at the sign ordinance, but just in the actual lighting of the building and how they use that, that's something like we can start implementing now that also affects the infill.
If you don't know,
I have one thing.
Yes, ma'am.
That in my district, Marcus, you know very well. Trailer parks.
Pardon me?
Trailer parks.
Manufactured home.
Yeah.
Manufactured homes.
Yeah,
They're not
yeah.
trailer parks.
Well,
They're manufactured homes. They're manufactured home communities.
Because I get calls very often that I forward to Scott. That way it can be addressed. But that's something we need to start looking at, because I have people, well, what about the skirting? How are they supposed to be anchored down? All this other
That
stuff.
sounds like more of a code enforcement issue.
But they claim there's nothing out there.
We have a chapter, a full chapter in our code of ordinances that deals with manufactured homes. And there's a whole laundry list of requirements, and those are code compliance issues if they're not properly maintained.
But that could probably be, I think one of the things she's brought up, there some of those things are just code compliance issues, and some of them are, our ordinance isn't as strong as it could be.
Well, that's true.
Correct.
So I think that's what you're talking about is for you,
fine
if we're
tuning.
prioritizing areas of the code that need to be updated.
Yes.
What I hear you saying is manufactured homes, to the extent that can be strengthened by state law that allows us to, then we may want to strengthen.
You have to watch it, because Marcus made a point, and our ordinance addresses this. I'm going to go back to 1976, 50 years ago. In 1976, it was changed from a mobile home to a manufactured home. So everything built after 76, and our ordinance prohibits anything older than 76 being moving in. But
that's still awfully old.
But that's awful old for a manufactured home. I understand. But those are another issue. But those are issues, yes.
All right.
So thank you. I just wanted.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor, on the development agreement policy. We may have hit on it before, but do we have a set procedure for those developers who come to the city that lays out when do they meet with city staff, when do they go to P and Z, when do they go to council? And the reason I ask that is our discussion on P and Z is that there are a lot of elements that we don't feel comfortable or qualified iron out within the development agreement. Now, there's a lot that in concept we can speak to and provide opinions, but I'm curious if someone comes and is asking for, let's say it's a pit, and there's financial numbers tied to that, that's going to be outside our sandbox of expertise, right? So
right.
Will they go to council first and have any kind of discussions, or will it come straight to P and Z? How does that work?
I don't know, but what I said earlier was, and I don't know exactly the details, but my vision would be that obviously a developer comes, they talk to Scott or Brianna or us together or whatever, and there's a concept and said, okay, our general role up front, here's our ordinances, but here's our policy, here's what we feel is the values, okay? Follow this one or provide us some type of proposal. That initial proposal, I would vision sending that to P and Z kind of looks through that and says, hey, you know what? Nah, or yeah, and then it kicks up the can, because when you're talking about a PID or a PUD or things like that, that's a negotiation more at the council level. That's when we'll get our P3 people to start negotiating that. But my opinion, unless somebody wants to just straight up follow the ordinance, if they want any incentives and things like that, y'all are kind of like a stopping point to say, yeah, we agree with the conceptual plan and push it forward with a recommendation. That's my opinion.
Two things. I don't think there is any reason you can't take this development agreement, not call it a development agreement, and put it in the front of the subdivision ordinance right now and say, subdivision development expectations or something like that.
It's a set of values.
I mean,
Development
you don't have to
values.
flesh it all out at that particular
Yeah.
point in time, but you can basically incorporate that as it sits. And mobile home, manufactured home, it all changed about 10 years ago. The state, the developers that support the people that run for office in Austin changed everything. And so, but there's a lot of rules around what the cities can do, because I know I was here when this first one came in over in my area, and the value of the home can't be less than homes within X distance and so forth. And then you can mandate some things as far as the home, but not very many. And so they cannot detract from the value of the homes in the neighborhood. But there are rules that cities have some flexibility to put in place about manufactured homes, but they're essentially allowed anywhere.
They're modular.
Whatever. I mean, somebody
clarify the process?
manufactured them somewhere.
Actually, while we're speaking to the process, because there is a paragraph in here that speaks to that, so let's just
Okay.
go through that real quick, just to make sure we're all
Okay.
okay with that, because that is a big part of it, and if we need to change things around, because what you said, Mayor, right now, kind of.
It's different?
It's a little different,
Okay.
but not much, so.
Yeah.
So, let's see, so we believe development agreement should be guided by a transparent process. Each proposal begins with a staff review to ensure alignment with city policy, so this development agreement policy, followed by a public engagement process that gives residents the opportunity to learn, ask questions, and share input. The Planning and Zoning Commission then reviews agreements for consistency with subdivision and zoning standards before forwarding a recommendation to City Council. Final approval rests with Council, ensuring the adopted agreements reflect community priorities and long-term goals.
And I'm fine with that. The only hiccup that I would see on this is how staff would deal with begins with a staff review to ensure alignment with policy, because all I'm saying is staff really is following the ordinance. And so I don't want a developer to misconstrue the meetings with staff that they got any approval for any.
And we do a pretty good job of making sure that that is not the
Okay,
case.
I just want to make sure.
That's been stated a couple of times tonight, and I want y'all to know, like, every conversation I have as a developer begins and ends with, "Hey, I have absolutely no authority. The council speaks. The mayor doesn't speak. I don't speak." Like,
You hear me?
the
tell
council
everybody
speaks,
says,
right?
I can tell you.
So
what
they
I
know
vote.
that.
Council, I vote.
But what that review would be, really, it's actually a.
Okay.
Think of it as a net, like it's a sieve, where if it's a bad idea, we'll tell them right, like, this doesn't comport with the values that have been expressed, and tell them to go back to the drawing board. So that's the idea, is that we don't want to waste the public time or P&Z time with something we know is not going to fly. So that's the only reason that's in there. It's not so that we give them some kind of, oh, this is going to be okay kind of thing. But
well, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And during the planning and zoning workshop, and y'all can speak to this, we talked a lot about how the process should go, when the public engagement should happen, because that is kind of a sticking, because I mean, the public's gonna, they love to go see the picture, and they love to say, well, actually, I want to park right there. And it's like, okay, well, we may not be able to make that happen, but we're getting your feedback. So if y'all see an issue with when the public engagement is taking place, because that can also be after planning and zoning input prior to it going to city council. Another reason, if I remember correctly, is the reason why I put the public engagement at the front end of it is because we wanted people to feel like they were heard prior to planning and zoning, because then if not, planning and zoning get a lot of those comments and concerns at their public hearing or their meeting, or not a public hearing, but at their meeting, when maybe some of those concerns could have been addressed prior to.
Well, let me correct myself then. I see P&Z's role is basically doing a broad stroke that it fits with our core values, and then push it from there. So because again, staff is looking at that, P and Z is looking at that, then it's the council level if they want to negotiate an actual agreement.
And so is everybody okay with that? Like the process would be a public meeting. So first meet with staff, see if it checks the boxes. It checks the boxes, then you guys have to call a public meeting.
Yeah.
So they would hold a town hall kind of thing. It wouldn't be a it'd be an advertised meeting, but it wouldn't be a council meeting, right?
No.
Where they would explain to the public what their plan is, and they'd seek feedback and input, and then it would go to P&Z, and then it would go to council.
Yes.
Is that?
That's how we
everybody
did
good with that?
Alsatian Oaks.
Yeah, and I think that's where that was coming from. Remember, and some of the feedback we got from these more recent development agreements was there wasn't enough transparency, wasn't enough public process, and so we had a dialogue about, well, where does that public process belong? And I think the consensus was it belongs at the beginning. It belongs before it gets to any what people feel like are closed door meetings. Before it gets to any of that, we should be having a public process.
Correct.
I think was
along that lines, by the time it comes to council, it's been flushed out that it matches up with our core values, and then we're just your negotiating agreement.
That's right. You're down to the brass tacks.
Yeah.
Well, what are the incentives and that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yep.
I like it. Jim, does that make sense? Process wise. Does anybody else have anything else? You know what? Yes, sir.
Yes, I do.
Yes, sir. I got close.
Yeah. So I wanted to say that because Phil kind of posed this question earlier, so I named you so you can respond to this now. You're welcome. So he asked what we thought of Bob, so I named him. He can respond too. What we thought of his comments, and I think overwhelmingly all of his suggested changes are improvements to this document, with the exception of the 2 times that he uses the word irrigation. I don't think we should be encouraging or requiring any developer to put in any irrigation system at all. I think that's irresponsible in our climate that we have here.
Even purple pipe?
I would be open to that.
Yeah.
But I don't think we should be encouraging hookups of any irrigation systems to our main water system.
Requiring them.
Requiring.
Right.
I've said before, and I'll say it again. I don't think we should be allowing them to, but I know that's not gonna sell.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
One quick thing. Brianna, I agree, and we're going back to this because I kept reading it over and over. The whole thing about connectivity and then your blocks and so forth. Going with Bob's suggestion, I think on connectivity, I think what we were talking, it really says it there, it just doesn't draw it out. But at the very beginning, if we say we value neighborhoods that are connected and to each other,
That's good.
and then I think that takes care of that issue.
Yes. Mr. Lee, are you good?
No, but I agree.
Okay.
So I have one other thing.
Did y'all have anything?
David said he has one more.
I know, but I'm going here first. I'm being fair.
No, I
Okay.
understand. Yeah,
Mr.
just
Mers.
letting you know.
Mr. Mers, go ahead.
Okay. So there was a question earlier, and I think it mostly went unaddressed of what is the process for starting to get some of these changes into the CZO, into the SDO, that members of the Planning and Zoning Commission or of City Council have noted. And I don't feel like we got a solid answer to that. If a member of Planning and Zoning Commission feels like there's a particular change that needs to be made, I'm sure they could easily request that to get put on their agenda. And then if the Planning and Zoning Commission feels it's ready, they can forward a recommendation to council.
Absolutely.
But if a member of council has a specific change that I think, because I'll take the hypothetical out of it, that I think should be made, what's the best way to get that onto their agenda? Because ultimately they have to give us a recommendation before we can take action on that. Should I just or another member of City Council?
What I would suggest
get together with like the chairman?
What I would suggest on that, and I'm suggesting it, is get that recommendation or suggestion to Scott, and Scott can contact the chairman of the P&Z and see if we can get it on their next agenda.
Well, I want to be careful because
be careful on that.
The thing that you have to be careful of is because I've seen this already.
Yeah.
Is an individual council member may feel very strongly about something. Let's pick something that
We're going through a process.
yeah. Let's just pick tree preservation, because that was a big issue, and then it wasn't, then it was. And the city has gone through iterations of that. So let's just pretend there's a council member that says tree preservation is my thing, and I want to go to the P&Z and I want to draft a tree preservation ordinance. But lo and behold, the other 4 council members could care less about tree preservation, right? So I would suggest that actually, Mayor, probably the way it needs to happen is the person who has the interest or concern needs to put it on an agenda item for council, get the council's consensus that it's something important, and then the council directs P&Z and gives P&Z an idea of what the level of priority is for that item, and says, hey, we'd like you to work on this, and we'd just like to see something in the next 3 months, 6 months, whatever the time.
That's the right way to do it.
Right?
Okay, that's the right way to do it.
I agree.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else? I know we're good. Is there anything else from y'all? Okay, well, if there's not, on the city council level here, we're going to adjourn this workshop at 6:25 PM.
Jim?
Okay. Jim, you going to Jamie Lynn?
At 6:25.
I didn't think we would be done.